Hello and welcome to the XLOG 2025 Holiday Edition. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what has happened in 2025 in the X4 universe and also about our plans for, well, at least the early months of 2026. So stay tuned for that. But I start a little bit with talking about what we've done this year so far. So the first thing was the Hyperion DLC and the 750 update. So the Hyperion was our first smaller DLC, a ship pack, but it's as you may know, it's more than just a ship pack. It's a very cool ship that people knew from the earlier X games, and many people loved it and asked for this as one ship that people wanted to be brought back into the X universe. So we reimagined it in the X4 setting. Obviously, much more detailed than what we could do in the past. I think the team did a great job also with going much more into detail in terms of interior design. This is a very special ship, and the DLC is about much more than just a ship. It has a little story. It has a new sector. So it's smaller than the DLCs we've made in the last few years, but also I think it's a nice package. And it came out together with the 750 update, which was a huge deal for us. This is like the complete flight model update, and this took us a lot of work, and it was a major change. And I think it took a longer than usual testing phase, because it was important for us to also get as much input as possible from the community about all those changes. I think the game overall has made a huge positive development because of it. But it is very important for us to see how people react to it and get the opinions of different types of players on some big change like that. And this is also something we will do in a similar way again for another change that is coming in 2026. I will talk about that soon. And so that was our first big release this year, and then for the first time we managed to have two big updates in 1 year. So this was followed in the middle of the year, or a little bit later in the middle of the year, with the second big package, which was the 8.0 update, and the Envoy pack, which was again a ship package. This is the Envoy. This contains two ships, the Cypher and the Envoy, both set around the covert action operations that went very well together with the diplomacy update that 8.0 was all about. So I think again the artist did a really great job. It's again very detailed interiors in these ships, but also the special feature of the ship, the fact that it can do these covert operations and change between two modes, where it actually changes its shape. This is really cool and something really special. So it's not just yet another ship. It comes with a story, and it comes with a unique feature, or with several unique features about camouflage protocols and the cloaking device. And it's two ships. So it's a really nice package. And came out together with the diplomacy update. I think we've talked quite a bit about that already. You have a really in-depth new feature about your ability to change the diplomatic relations between factions by using agents that you can send around in the universe on missions, and also giving you this new diplomatic embassy room as a upgrade for your headquarters, where you can place faction representatives and have direct relations with the factions. So I think that's also a really cool feature. Of course, there was so much more. We updated the engine. The graphic engine is always something we work on. We had the volumetric clouds. We have the DLSS frame generation that was introduced with 8.0, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that part because that's also something we are continuing to develop in 2026. So stay tuned for the end of this video about that part. Lots of things, obviously also always bug fixes and lots of other improvements also in the AI. And again, that is something that we are always working on. There's a lot of stuff that has happened in this year, and I think we're really happy with how things worked. So the next big step is coming up. So now we are at the end of the year. There is a really nice thing to finish this year now during the holiday season. I have the pleasure to announce that we are right now in a big sale on Steam. This is the very first time that the game is available. The base game is available for 90% off. So this is a cool opportunity to bring your friends into X4 Foundations. Please help us promote this and spread the word. If you don't know X4 yet, this is a great way to start. Also, of course, all the DLCs are also on discount. So this is probably the best time yet to start and start into this universe. And 2026, this whole voyage will continue. We have a lot of big plans for 2026, and it will start with the mysterious 9.0 update. That is the next big package that we have planned. I cannot go into too much detail, but there are two important areas that I think I can talk about a little bit. And one is that our artists have worked on making changes to the older ships in X4 possible. The base game is out for a long time. We have made updates with new ships also in the base game over the years. I mean, we try to have content in the DLCs as well as in the base game. We do this mixture, and but still there are of course also some ships that are basically in the game since day one, and that has limited us on a graphical front a little bit, and also on the balancing side of these ships. So one thing that we are trying to do with the 9.0 update is that we are really going through all of the old ships and basically updating them on a technical level so that we can work on the modularity of ship updates. This means changes to the graphic models of all of those ships, and in some cases also visual updates. So stay tuned for that. But what it also makes possible is a major combat update, because this will allow us to rebalance more than 250 different weapons across the game. And I mean, over the years we have added so much to this game that some of the changes have basically made shifts to the overall balancing of weapons in the game that we were not super happy with anymore, but were hard to change because of these relations with the older graphic models. That has something to do with the compatibility of weapon connections on ships, and what is basically compatible, which weapon upgrades and which shields are compatible also on a visual level, like purely from how they fit to the ship. So this first change that I talked about on the graphic model of older ships basically unlocks our ability to rebalance a lot of the weapons in the game, and that is the combat update, and that's the main focus of 9.0. But there is more, and that again it goes together with a lot of AI changes, which is a big focus to improve. And It also comes together with a change in the user interface that will allow you to give more direct orders, quicker orders for making control in remote controls of ships faster. So in order to control fleets and remote ships faster, you cannot just queue orders, but give direct orders that have priority. It's a bit more complicated, and I will go into more detail about these different modes when we are closer to the release, as usual, especially when the beta phase starts, and we hope to do that in the first quarter of 2026. So stay tuned. There's a lot of cool and exciting stuff coming up. Again, I will, at the end of this video, go to past me explaining the DLSS frame generation, and also the fact that this is also something that we are continuing to develop and extend also to other graphic cards, because DLSS is the NVIDIA version, and we hope to bring this also for AMD graphic cards. Much technical updates, and this is just an example of the stuff we've been doing. So stay tuned. I wish all of you a very nice holiday season, good and relaxing days, maybe a little bit of time in the X universe. And I wish you all Merry Xmas and a Happy New Year. And I hope to see you soon in the public beta. And now I'm handing over to past me explaining DLSS frame generation and why it is a really cool feature, and you should probably try it out. Hello, I would like to explain to you today the feature of frame generation on your graphic card. This is something we've started introducing this year with the diplomacy update, and we're still working on it and hope to make it available to more hardware, to more graphic cards with the next update. So far this only works with NVIDIA graphic cards under the name DLSS frame generation. And this is a very useful feature, especially for X4 Foundations, and I think people should know more about it and how it works and why it is especially useful for our game and similar games. So, as you may or may not know, X4 Foundations is a bit special when it comes to how it simulates its universe. We have basically the whole simulation of the universe running on the CPU. The game behaves a lot like an MMO, a game where a large universe is simulated on a server, but because it's a single player game, this whole simulation of the universe is running on your own computer, on your CPU. This requires a lot of memory, more memory than most games usually do, and do need, and a lot of CPU power as well. We are basically processing thousands of ships that are flying through the universe, not just the ones that you see, but ones at the opposite side of the universe. Stations are producing wares, and the whole life in that universe is happening all the time. So we've optimized the hell out of this, and are still working on optimizing it further in the future, but whatever we do, this is something that is putting some stress on the CPU. And that is the reason why our game is sometimes more CPU bound rather than GPU bound. So the GPU is your graphic card, and mostly gamers are used to the fact that their frame rate depends on the graphic settings and on the graphic card they have on the GPU. And this can be true in X4 Foundations as well, if you set the graphic settings to the very maximum, or if you have a mid or low-end graphic card. But more often than not, X4 Foundations is also CPU bound, because it runs all of the simulation in the background. And if on top of that you also find yourself in an extremely busy sector with a lot of ships flying around you, near a shipyard maybe, where hundreds of ships are docking at the same time, yeah, then the CPU has to do more. Even though you have all of those beautiful graphics and those have to be rendered, there's always one thing only that limits your frame rate in the end, and in X4 that is pretty often the CPU. So frame generation, which happens on the graphic card and is basically an AI that tries to predict additional frames in between the frames, the real frames that the game is generating, can then be very useful for a game like ours, because in a situation where the game is running at a lower frame rate, you just have more stress on the graphic card, but not on the CPU, and double your frame rate. Or even in the latest DLSS frame generation technology, you could even quadruple your frame rate. It's a fixed multiple, so you can only double or quadruple your frame rate. There's no in between. You cannot fade it in, unfortunately. But it's very powerful if done right. All of those DLSS technologies and AI features in general running on a graphic card have a little bit of a bad reputation, because people associate them sometimes with weird artifacts that they see on screen. And that's a bit unfair, because this is not necessarily always the case. It depends on something called motion vectors that the game developer has to calculate. So basically tell the graphic card for every pixel on screen where they are moving. And if you do that correctly, then this AI is able to predict where everything on screen is moving, and therefore calculate pretty precise interpolated frames, basically the frame in between two frames. So if your game is running, for example, at only 30 frames per second, you can double this to 60, and every second frame would be generated by the GPU. There is a downside to this, and that is latency. In a shooter, for example, when you are making very erratic movements, when you are moving around very quickly, this can create problems, because obviously those quick movements would not be predictable by those motion vectors. Maybe they are pointing one way, but you already moved your mouse in the opposite way, and therefore predictions with low frame rates will still lead to some weird effects on screen. In a space game like ours, where you are flying a ship most of the time, that is not so much the case, because ships are moving much more slowly than your head might. So yeah, long story short, if the game does everything right in terms of telling the graphic card where all the pixels on the screen are going, these motion vectors can make these interpolated frames basically perfect, and basically work in a way that there is no difference between the real generated frames and those predicted by the graphic card. And that's a great thing. You can double your frame rate or even quadruple it in extreme situations. We are always working at making the game run smoother and faster, obviously, and this is something that we've done since the release of X4 Foundations, and we are still doing now, and still putting a lot of effort in, and that is making a lot of progress from year after year. Unfortunately, or fortunately, in whatever way you see it, players use these optimizations to do also more extreme things. So no matter what we do, make the game run smoother and faster, it also is countered by players making more crazy save games, putting more ships on screen, putting more stations in their universe, putting more sectors, more stations near each other in the same sector. All of those are factors that will hurt your frame rate, will make the game run slower again. So this is basically a vicious circle. The more we work on it, the more people will bring the frame rate down again as well. That's fun. I mean, that's how it is. And if you know what's going on, it's perfectly fine. Nobody should expect a game in which you have no limits to what you can build, and in terms of how many ships you can own and have fly around you, to run super smooth. There is always a maximum, and where that maximum is depends obviously on your hardware and on your CPU more than on your GPU. But anyway, frame generation can be extremely useful to help you with that, and I was showing you a little bit of the more extreme save games here in the background. These are mostly things coming from customers where you see very big universes with a lot of stuff going on, and usually these things run even on very fast PCs relatively slow, so maybe below 30 frames per second even. And with frame generation you can double or quadruple it. Quadrupling is something you will notice the latency obviously more than with just doubling. And even if you already have the game running smooth like it normally does, obviously the normal universe, when you start into the universe, the game should be running at 60 frames per second very often. And if you have doubling, then you bring the frame rate to 120 frames per second, and that's a great thing. And by the way, this is also a reason why we introduced a maximum frame rate to the game, because if you have something like quadrupling turned on all the time and the game is running with already a native high frame rate, then you can now basically get to several hundred frames per second frame rates on your machine, especially with a fast computer, and that is basically burning a lot of unnecessary energy, because if your monitor cannot render that many frames, then it's basically just wasted power. So for that reason it makes sense to have a maximum frame rate and set that to something reasonable, usually dictated by your monitor. If your monitor is able to render 120 frames, maybe you want that many. It's noticeable, it is smoother, but it's not a huge difference to 60 frames per second. But obviously the higher up you go, the less the benefit is, and rendering 400 frames per second, which is something that I saw on my 5090 with a pretty fast CPU, is just heating up the room unnecessarily. So yeah, enjoy DLSS frame generation, try it out, it's definitely worth it. If you have a very fast graphic card, you can combine it with DLAA, which is also a very good anti-aliasing technique. And with the next update, we hope to also bring you similarly good technology on other graphic cards. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.